They set me up on a blind date with an overweight girl, but my reaction left the room in tears when my aunt called me that Friday morning insisting I come to the family restaurant in Chicago for dinner. She made it sound like a simple gathering, but the moment I walked through the door and saw both of my uncles, families crammed around 2 long tables instead of the quiet evening I had been promised, I understood immediately that this was not an ordinary dinner. It was an ambush disguised as hospitality, and sitting alone at the far corner, nervously twisting a napkin in her hands, was a young woman named Emily, and I could feel the tension in the room before anyone said a word. The barely hidden smirks passed between my cousins, the way my uncle nudged his son and whispered something that made him snicker, because Emily was heavier than what our relatives considered acceptable, and somewhere along the way that had become an open joke in our family, something people felt entitled to comment on without a second thought. My aunt had arranged this blind date not out of genuine care but as cruel entertainment, expecting me to take one look, make some polite excuse and leave, expecting me to add my own humiliation to a pile she had clearly endured many times before, and I could see it plainly in Emily's posture, the way she kept her eyes down, the way her shoulders were braced as if bracing for impact, like someone who has spent years being measured and dismissed before she even has the chance to speak. So instead of taking the seat they had arranged for me across the room, deliberately far from her, I walked straight past my smirking cousins and pulled out the chair right beside Emily, and the entire room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Because that reaction was not part of anyone's script, my cousin Ryan let out an awkward laugh, clearly expecting me to say something cutting once I sat down, but instead I turned to Emily and simply asked her what she liked to read, since my aunt had mentioned in passing that she worked at the downtown public library, and slowly, cautiously, she looked up and started talking. And within minutes, we were deep in conversation about a novel she had just finished, about her dream of opening a small, free reading corner for kids in her neighborhood, about how books had always felt like the one place where nobody judged her on sight. And I found myself completely absorbed, forgetting the audience around us, forgetting the whispers, because she was sharp, funny, and full of warmth that no one at that table had bothered to notice before. It was only when I saw her hands, trembling slightly around the edge of her coffee cup, that I realized just how much courage it had taken her to walk into that room at all, knowing exactly what kind of reception she might receive, so I said, loud enough for every relative at those 2 tables to hear clearly, that I would very much like to see her again, that I found her intelligent and kind and genuinely worth knowing, and that is when I watched my aunt's smug smile collapse into something closer to shame, and I watched Emily's eyes well up, not from humiliation this time, but from the simple, overwhelming relief of being seen as a person instead of a punchline for once in her life. Half the room went completely silent, and a few of my older relatives quietly got up and left without meeting anyone's eyes, unable to sit with what their own cruelty had almost caused that night. But I did not care about their discomfort, because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is choose kindness exactly when everyone around them is expecting mockery instead. And that one small choice did not just change Emily's evening, it changed the way my entire family speaks about people's bodies at every gathering since, because nobody wants to be the next person caught laughing at someone else's pain. And months later, when Emily and I sat together at that same restaurant, this time by choice and not by ambush, I realized that the best stories rarely start with grand gestures. They start with someone simply choosing to pull out the chair beside you instead of walking away. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories for more real stories of compassion, courage, and human kindness.